Undertale is a game about moving on. Emotions were high in the Undertale community during the 10th anniversary of the game, as they are at any yearly mark. It's powerful to reminisce on the person you were 10 years ago and reflect on how you've changed and what has happened since. Undertale is a game that welcomes this, encourages it even. Many moments invoke this idea of nostalgia, of the impermanence of the self, and of improvement of one's character. But throughout all of Undertale, one emotion lingers in the background, sometimes explicit, and sometimes not. The Underground is a place paralyzed and decaying, where your choices are so important to understand the past and change the future of the monsters, whether you are slaughtering or saving them. The past haunts Undertale and the characters within, and the emotion of grief, a future robbed and a past destroyed, plays heavily on the characters. At the end of the day though, regardless of your actions and choices, you have to say goodbye, and you inherit this grief. Welcome viewers, I'm Vivat Veritas, and I've been thinking a lot about how Toby Fox writes and cares about endings, thanks to both writing the Fate theory and watching the 10th anniversary Undertale playthrough stream, which is when I started working on this script. It's taken me quite a bit. I'm personally very lucky to be of sapient age to the point where I remember 2015 quite well. I remember playing Undertale for the first time, internalizing and analysing all of the themes that it presented like a starving literature student keen for any scraps. I was also, like many, going through a rather tumultuous time when this game came out, something that I mentioned in my It's Raining Somewhere Else video and is kind of a given when you're 16 years old. Undertale, the song, is one of the tracks that can, without fail, still reduce me to tears after all of these years. Many people have talked about the excellence of Undertale, especially the multiple various endings, but I think there's been something left by the wayside, something slightly overlooked when discussing the brilliance of this game and what induces these feelings of melancholic adoration. Today I want to explore what makes Undertale so special, that is, its fascination with inherited grief and how to process a farewell. Join me, won't you? When we begin to play Undertale, it is in a point of stasis. Even over 10 years later, I don't believe we have a hard date as to how long it's been between Kara falling and Frisk falling into the Underground, but it goes beyond that. Really, the Underground has been in this paralyzed state since they were sealed away by the magicians at the end of the war, and this is the world that both Kara and Frisk explore. It's important to recognize the fact that this frozen grief, a future lost, is inherent to Undertale even before Kara and Asriel start haunting the narrative like the silly little ghost children they are, but we know much more about current day Undertale, so we'll focus on that. There is a lot that defines the Underground culturally, but one of the key points is the social conflict between freedom and stability. There are many monsters, such as Undyne, Metaton, and Brady and Caddy, who want to break the barrier for whatever reasons they have, some violent and some less so. At the same time, there are plenty of monsters, such as Sans, Toriel, and ironically Asgore, who really just want to be happy in a place and don't care about these aspirations. It might seem that one of these two perspectives adds much more to the feeling of stasis, but they're different sides of the same coin. Asgore acknowledges this much in his own conversations with Frisk, talking about how really what the Underground needed was hope. What they needed was something to make them keep going through the grief of losing everything. The vendetta that monsters have against humans is something that, even for those who don't personally believe or care about it, is important to the continued existence of the monsters, regardless of how impractical or realistic it is. They need this guidance to make sure they keep moving, but they're not moving forward. It's just waiting for the final human child to fall and leave, regardless of everything they've all built there. I've talked at length before regarding how Kara and Asriel haunt the narrative, as it were, so if you want more information about the grief inherent to the themes and ideas of Undertale, give that video a watch. Needless to say, Undertale is a stable society, but one that is spinning its wheels. The society of the Underground is static and full of grief, and this applies similarly to the main characters. Toriel and Asgore's grief from losing both Asriel and Kara is palpable and motivates both the history and current events of the game. Alphys feels deeply the grief and holiness from her experiments of determination in the True Lab. Sans' melancholic nature is on full display in the hotel diner scene, which I've talked about at length. Even characters who don't seem as grief-stricken still have it somewhere near the core of their personality. Undyne is a great example here. She's headstrong, arrogant, and explosive in her demeanor, yet ultimately she is motivated by the future and life that was robbed of her by the old humans. Of course, not all characters exhibit this trait. Metaton and Papyrus both seem pretty unaffected by the loss and grief affecting the populace, though of course complexity does reside within their characters. However, the character that has the most interesting relationship with grief is Flowey. Not Azriel, but Flowey, and it's precisely because the grief is so hidden. Flowey talks a lot about how he doesn't feel emotions, and although he's certainly an unreliable narrator, it doesn't matter if we believe him here because it's exceedingly obvious that he's got some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms. Ultimately, what drives Flowey through his eventual downturn into the creature we meet him as is his own personal loss and his very inability to grieve. He can't properly process the trauma of what's happened to him, and he becomes lost in the experiment of it all, treating everyone and everything like a game that was at his complete mercy. He couldn't, literally and metaphorically, accept that he wasn't the same as he used to be, and more than anything else, he got so tired of trying to fill a hole that he was simply unable to. His loss consumed him, twisting him into the bitter individual we see now, one only interested in breaking this world in half for his own entertainment. It's not until he gets all those souls of the underground in him that he realizes what he's forgotten, and he realizes what he's become, but we'll get to that in a bit. Man, I love Flowey. What a well-written character. He just truly epitomizes the impact that grief and loss can have on a character, even when they themselves are what others lost. Not only does he have his own grief, but he has the inherited societal grief from his family. It's also no surprise that Flowey is integral to absolutely every ending of Undertale, which makes sense when he's the final boss in like 92 of them. Flowey's existence here means to pass down that grief he has, that all of Undertale has, into us. But how does one even go about that? Of course, every video game has to end. That's not particularly special, though it does seem like more and more companies would like unlimited games but no games. We always need to move on from our experiences with a piece of media once we're done with it. There are also plenty of games that are full of these dour feelings, but are not, I would say, about saying goodbye. Why is it that Undertale's ending makes this process so impactful and this idea so resonant? Naturally, the special sauce that Undertale has lies in the ending, or endings, plural. When talking about Undertale's endings, I'm not particularly keen to restate thoughts and ideas that have been part of the community for a very long time. If you want to know broadly why Undertale's endings are so good, there are plenty of videos already on that. Instead, I want to go into the specific details as to why the feeling of grief and loss inherent to the game carries into the endings and is imparted onto the player. The most important part of this puzzle that needs to be acknowledged is the existence of the true pacifist route. Well, I mean, I think we're all acknowledging it, but the specific way it exists in the game's meta-narrative. The true pacifist route, by and large, is the true ending of Undertale. I have the urge to provide evidence, but I don't think it should be a particularly controversial point. In terms of what Undertale is commenting on, the themes and values that it is trying to impart, it seems that both Toby and the community have somewhat agreed that the true pacifist ending is the ideal outcome. I mean, it's in the name. The genocide/no mercy route certainly exists as a counter to it, and there is a lot of interesting information to glean from it, but I don't believe that it's encouraged in the same way as true pacifist. In my mind, the genocide route acts as a rebuking of the player, punishing them with incredibly difficult fights that are posed by Flowey as being bad to enjoy within the world of Undertale itself. I'm not saying that you're a bad person for enjoying the Sans fight, of course. I do think Sans would think that, but who cares what a fictional skeleton thinks of you? We see the trueness of the true pacifist route reinforced in places like the 10th anniversary stream, where it's exactly the point that we all get to. It's easy to see this ending as the happy ending, and it is, for all the characters within Undertale. However, it's not for us, the player, because Well, now we're done with the game. Because of Toby Fox's funny tricks, we're left with this desire to not keep going, to leave these characters to their happy ending and move on with our life. Funnily enough, this is the same conclusion that the genocide route ends with whatever now calls itself Kara encouraging us to move on to the next world and continue being power gamers there. However, it's much more salient in the true pacifist ending because we actually have something to leave behind. We have, objectively, massively improved everyone's lives. We've freed the underground, got some people together, and helped some people move on from some very real and deep grief. We're not lauded as a hero, nor do we receive any reward. That's pretty natural, of course. The happy ending is our reward, which is especially impactful in a game with so many possible endings. However, Undertale is actually telling us something. This isn't a neutral ending, haha, it's imparting something onto us. What is that? Well, within the true pacifist ending there is a particular element we really need to drill down on. Unsurprisingly, it's one of the two ghosts of the narrative himself, Asriel Dreamer. I personally view Asriel, and by extension Flowey, as the character who talks the most to the player of Undertale, whether that is as a commentary on the themes, or just directly to us. Don't look behind the conveniently Kara-shaped lamp. In the battle against the god of hyperdeath proper, Asriel talks a big game about you continuing on despite multiple resets thanks to your determination. He wants to keep this whole thing going, and he knows that you'll do it precisely because of that aforementioned happy ending you're looking for. However, it doesn't take a psychologist to understand the underlying tone of what he's saying, mostly because he says it himself a bit later. Once we've saved all of our friends and their memories, there is, of course, one last person to save. Whether this person is Asriel or Kara, like Toby suggests in the 10th anniversary stream, it still triggers a grand emotional cascade within Asriel, who has spent all of this time fighting to keep us engaged. He admits that he kept this whole situation going because we were the only one who was fun to play with, not only as Asriel, but as Flowey too. Asriel is still in denial, thanks to his grief, that we are indeed Kara, and so these words are meant for them, but also us, the player. Classic Kara moment. This is the moment where the true aspect of the true pacifist ending rears its head. This isn't about how important a happy ending is. It's not even about seeing all the content the game has to offer. It's about Asriel, Kara, and ultimately us processing the ending and moving on. Here we get some of the most emotional and impactful dialogue in all of Undertale, in my opinion at least.
I'm not ready for this to end. I'm not ready for you to leave. I'm not ready to say goodbye to someone like you again.
Asriel mirrors the situation that we find ourselves in, especially one who is playing the true pacifist route as it is somewhat intended to be, that is, after at least one neutral ending. We know we're coming to the end of a game that is at the very least doing something, regardless of how much it has affected us. Asriel is so desperately trying to hold onto something that is slipping away from here, and we know tragically isn't even here. He's in denial, but even if he wasn't, it's still something that's ending. He can't accept the fact that everything he grew up with, the most important people in his life, and the emotion that came with all of it are not within his control and are constantly drifting away. This is even more true in the altered battle dialogue from the 10th anniversary stream.
I'm not ready for this to end. It can't have been a year already. It can't have been 5 years already. It can't have been 10 years already. It can't have been everything. Everyone I loved can't keep getting further away. We can't go any further than this. Please. I don't want to keep growing up. Not without you.
Jesus Christ, Toby. This section of dialogue is what initially inspired me to write the video. It's just so emotionally potent that I struggle to really put into words how relevant it is to the whole topic of moving on. It just is. Look at it. Asriel can't handle the years passing him by with only his memories to console him, and this journey that he is on reflects the one that we do as well. We too are encouraged to allow this feeling in ourselves thanks to the work that has happened in the 10th anniversary stream. We too might feel like these past 10 years have flown by and we have no idea who or where we are anymore. This transforms from a commentary on how a current player might be feeling in the base game to attempting to empathize with the countless people who played Undertale. It's a funny trap from Toby to almost weaponize this. The people who are tuning into the 10th anniversary stream are exactly the people who would be affected by this the most, though maybe I'm just projecting. However, we, like Asriel, have to accept that we do have to grow up without these characters and experiences in our life. All we have to go on is their memory. But the journey that Asriel goes through lets us know that it's okay to let go. In fact, we have to. Famously, you can find Asriel where Frisk fell down at the start of the game when you're backtracking through the underground during the epilogue, and he has more unique dialogue. This is where we find out a lot of information about him, Kara, and their history. I've talked about it before, it's not super relevant to this video outside of the fact that Asriel still obviously has some complex feelings about Kara. Once we've exhausted all of Asriel's dialogue, perhaps searching for some secret that means we'll be able to make sure he doesn't revert back to Flowey, Asriel gives us a gut punch with this line. "Don't you have anything better to do?" This isn't an insult or a veiled plea, it's almost a request. We're done here. It's over. You have other things to be doing. It's time to move on. This is what I mean when I say the game and Asriel show us the path forward. We can't just stay here forever, both within the game and outside of it. We can't stay wallowing in our fear and desperation for time to not pass us by. We have to accept that things change and move on. I mentioned this in my Ghost of Undertale video, but it's telling that saving the goat was such a core aspect of early Undertale fan content. Some of the most well-known pieces of fan work within the community were centered around being able to save Asriel, fix everything. But there are some things that we just can't make better. There are some things we just need to move on from, to remember it like this, like someone that was our friend for a little while. When you boot up your game after seeing the True Pacifist credits, Flowey even acknowledges this, telling you to let Frisk and the others live their life and let them go. Again and again it is reinforced to us by Asriel, regardless of form, that you have to move on from the things that move away from you, and you shouldn't try to live in the past. You honour it by remembering it, not trying to delude yourself into thinking it's still the present. Hopefully by now you can see how Toby and his teams have shown that although you shouldn't move on from your feelings and your past with Undertale, and you should never stop loving it, there is so much more out there for you. Undertale simultaneously encourages you to get so deeply attached to it, so lost in its world, while also moving on to different things. I think that Toby is very aware of this. He did make the game after all, and he reinforces this point. For reasons you might be able to glean from Deltarune, I personally think Toby has an interest in how a game can end for a player, and Undertale demonstrates this interest well. He reminds us to stay connected to this game, to remember all the great fun we've had, so we can carry it with us. He's mentioned that the greatest thing in his mind is that someone out there would be inspired by Undertale and create something even better. There isn't a grand point that Undertale won't end even if we still love it, more so that Undertale has ended, and that's okay because of how we remember it. Undertale is undeniably special, but not because the game is somehow infinite and constant. No, Undertale is special because the game itself tells us that it's over. Through thinking about the game, through talking about it with others, and through making our own path, we remember and hold Undertale close to our hearts, and, in our own way, manage to move on. More and more years will pass between Undertale's release and now, whatever now is when you watch this video, but that's a good thing. It lets us see the past and the future in different lights. More and more years will have to get further away from what we once experienced and the people we were then, but at the end of it all, despite everything, it's still you. Let's finish this and go home. I hope you all enjoyed this video. This is, in my opinion, a very natural extension of what my Ghosts of Undertale video was about. It's not an accident that both of them were inspired by their respective anniversaries. Many of my emotions and thoughts have been expanded upon since that first video, and I think this is a really good conclusion, especially alongside the work I've been doing on the Fate theory. I've also broken one of the main tenets of longer videos of mine by not having my funny chapters. I tried to put them in, but they just weren't any places that made sense. What can I say? It's a very fluid script. I didn't want to interrupt the flow at any point. This is a shorter one of my videos, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, though looking over at my time, it seems like it's rapidly approaching the 20-minute mark, so maybe not. Keep an eye out for more videos coming from me this year. It's going to be an interesting one, especially with the release of Chapter 5 at some point. Thank you so much as always to my excellent patrons Meggie, Zalgo, Michael Bates, Tubby Fitzhugh, Mio, and Nigel Robinson. I really appreciate the extra support. As always, check the link in the description to support me on Patreon as well, and while you're there, feel free to subscribe and comment as a free way to show your support. Until next time, I've been Vivat Veritas, and I'll see you again